The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Isla Carver sat in the empty classroom, third-grade artwork peeling from the bulletin boards, and watched the parking lot through rain-streaked windows. 5:47 p.m. Most teachers left by 4. Most teachers hadn't been asked to stay for a meeting that would determine whether they kept their job. Principal Hastings had been clear that morning. One more incident with Luca Navarro, and we're removing you from the classroom for your own protection. Protection. The word tasted like failure. Isla folded her hands on the desk, feeling the tremor in her fingers. She'd taught for 6 years across 3 districts. She'd handled children with trauma, children with rage, children who'd seen things no child should see. But Luca Navarro was different, not because he was violent. He'd never raised a hand to anyone, not because he was disruptive in the traditional sense. He was silent, completely, devastatingly silent. For 3 weeks he'd sat in the back corner of her classroom, dark eyes tracking movement like a security camera, and hadn't spoken a single word. Not to answer questions, not to ask for help, not even to say yes or no. Other students gave him wide berth. Teachers whispered his last name like a curse. Everyone knew who his father was. Matteo Navarro didn't make headlines. He erased them. The kind of man whose name appeared in sealed court documents and witness protection paperwork. The kind of wealth that didn't come from venture capital or inheritance. The Harbor District belonged to him the way shadows belong to alleys. 4 teachers had already resigned rather than have Luca in their classroom. Isla was the 5th. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Expensive shoes on linoleum, the kind of deliberate pace that suggested a man who'd never rushed for anything in his life. She didn't turn around, didn't stand, didn't rearrange her expression into something professional or afraid. She simply waited. Matteo Navarro entered her classroom the way weather entered a room, shifting the pressure, changing the temperature. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. Dark hair swept back from a face that was handsome in the way cliffs were handsome, all hard angles and unforgiving lines. A thin scar traced his left eyebrow. His hands, clasped loosely in front of him, bore the faint marks of old violence. But it was his eyes that caught her. Black coffee dark, tired, intelligent, searching. Behind him, smaller and quieter, came Luca. Same dark hair, same cautious eyes, wearing a school uniform that was immaculate despite the rain. He didn't look at Isla. He looked at the floor, at the wall, at the space between things. Miss Carver. Matteo's voice was low, controlled, with the faintest Mediterranean accent softened by years in America. Thank you for staying late. Mr. Navarro. Isla gestured to the student-sized chairs across from her desk. Please, sit. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or assessment. Men like him weren't often invited to sit in tiny plastic chairs meant for 8-year-olds. But he did, folding himself into the seat with a grace that suggested comfort in uncomfortable spaces. Luca took the chair beside him, still not looking up. Silence settled like dust. Most people filled silence with nervous chatter when faced with Matteo Navarro. Isla had read the incident reports, seen the way even Principal Hastings' hand shook during their morning meeting. But Isla had learned long ago that silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything people were afraid to say. So she said nothing. She simply looked at Luca, then at his father, and waited. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a janitor's cart rattled past. Matteo leaned back slightly, studying her with the focus of a man who made his living reading people. You're not afraid. It wasn't a question. Should I be? Isla asked. Most people are. I'm not most people. His mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. No, you're the 5th teacher they've assigned to my son. The others lasted an average of 4 days before requesting transfers. I know. Do you know why? Isla glanced at Luca. The boy's shoulders had drawn up slightly, tension coiling through his small frame. I have theories. Share them. She chose her words carefully. Your son is 7 years old. He's been enrolled in 4 different schools in the past 2 years. His file says he's never spoken in class, never completed group work, never participated in recess. 3 child psychologists have evaluated him. All 3 concluded there's nothing medically wrong with his speech or cognition. She paused. But every teacher who's tried to work with him has left within a week. Not because of Luca, because of the fear that comes with your name. Matteo's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a microscopic easing of tension that suggested she'd said something unexpected. They think I'll hurt them if they fail my son, he said quietly. Will you? No. The word was simple, absolute, delivered without defensiveness or explanation. Isla believed him, not because she was naive, but because she'd spent 6 years learning to recognize lies. Children lied with their whole bodies. Adults lied with their mouths. But truth had weight. Then why, Isla asked, is Luca so afraid? The boy flinched, just barely. A tightening around his eyes, a hitch in his breathing. Matteo noticed. His hand moved just slightly, as if to reach for his son, then stopped. He's not afraid of me. I didn't say he was. Another pause, longer this time. Isla watched father and son sit side by side, in chairs too small for one and too large for the other, separated by inches that felt like miles. May I try something? Isla asked. Matteo's eyes narrowed. What kind of something? Nothing invasive, nothing that will embarrass him. She stood slowly, moving to a cabinet at the side of the classroom. I'd like to give Luca a choice. She returned with 3 items, a whiteboard and marker, a notebook and pencil, and a small box of Lego bricks. She placed them on the desk between herself and the boy, then stepped back. Luca, she said gently, you don't have to talk. Not today, not tomorrow, not until you're ready. But if you'd like to communicate with me, you can use any of these. Draw, write, or build, whatever feels right. Or you can sit there and do nothing. That's okay too. The boy stared at the objects like they were a test, a trap. Matteo said nothing, but Isla felt his attention sharpen. Luca's hand moved, slowly, hesitantly. His fingers hovered over the Lego box, then the notebook. Then he picked up the whiteboard. Isla's heart beat faster, but she kept her expression calm. Okay, take your time. The marker squeaked softly as Luca uncapped it. His handwriting was careful, precise. The letters formed with the concentration of a child who'd been taught that mistakes had consequences. He held up the board. They always leave. 3 words. A lifetime of abandonment. Isla felt something crack open in her chest. Not pity, but recognition. She'd been that child once. Different circumstances, same wound. She pulled her own chair around the desk and sat at Luca's level, close, but not crowding. You're right, she said. They did leave, and I'm sorry that happened to you. Luca stared at her, marker still in hand. But I'm not them, Isla continued. I'm here because I want to be. Not because I'm afraid of your father, and not because someone made me. I'm here because I think you're worth showing up for. The boy's eyes widened slightly. Matteo inhaled, sharp, controlled, like a man who'd just been struck and was determining whether to strike back. Isla turned to him. Mr. Navarro, I need you to understand something. I can't promise your son will talk. I can't promise he'll suddenly love school or make friends or become a different child. What I can promise is that I will show up every day for as long as it takes. Why? The question was hard, searching. You don't know us. You owe us nothing. Because nobody showed up for me when I was his age. The truth slipped out before she could stop it, raw and unpolished. My mother left when I was 6. My father worked 3 jobs. I spent 2 years in elementary school, not talking to anyone, because I didn't know how to explain that I went home to an empty house every day. Teachers gave up on me, called me slow, stubborn, broken. She looked back at Luca. I wasn't broken. I was afraid. and nobody stayed long enough to see the difference. The silence that followed was different, heavier, full of things shifting beneath the surface. Luca picked up the marker again. "You won't leave?" "Not unless you want me to," Isla said. The boy studied her for a long moment, those dark eyes, so much like his father's, looking for the lie, the trap, the inevitable betrayal. Then he wrote one more word. "Okay, if this story has pulled you in, you're in the right place. Stay with us." The first week was an exercise in patience. Luca came to class every morning at 8:15 sharp, delivered by a silent driver in a black Mercedes that idled at the curb like a predator. He sat in his usual back corner, whiteboard on his desk, and watched. Isla didn't push, didn't ask him to participate or read aloud or join group activities. She simply included him. When she asked the class a question, she looked at Luca too. When students partnered up for reading, she left a chair beside him, empty and available. When they had art time, she placed supplies at his desk without comment. 3 days in, he started writing on the whiteboard during lessons. Short answers, single words, but answers. Photosynthesis. 1492. Adjective. Isla marked him present and participating in her gradebook. Other teachers noticed. Principal Hastings started watching through the door window during morning lessons, arms crossed, expression unreadable. On Friday, Sophia Raines, the teacher who'd quit after 3 days with Luca, cornered Isla in the faculty lounge. "You're wasting your time." Sophia poured coffee with shaking hands, not meeting Isla's eyes. "That child is... There's something wrong there. The father, the whole situation. It's not safe." "Has he threatened you?" Isla asked quietly. "Navarro? No, but you hear things. People go missing around him. Witnesses change their stories. I have a family to think about." "So does he." Sophia's laugh was bitter. "That man doesn't have a family. He has an empire built on fear." Isla wanted to argue, but didn't. Sophia wasn't entirely wrong. She'd done her research. Matteo Navarro's name appeared in FBI reports, organized crime databases, and 3 decades worth of unsolved cases. The Harbor District's drug trade, illegal gambling, protection rackets, all roads led back to him, but nothing ever stuck. Yet the man who'd sat in her classroom hadn't felt like a monster. He'd felt like a father who was desperate and didn't know how to ask for help. That evening, Isla stayed late again, grading papers in the empty classroom. The sun set behind the school, casting long shadows through the windows. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear the footsteps until they were right outside her door. Matteo stood in the doorway, still in that impeccable suit, but his tie was loosened, and exhaustion lined his face. "Miss Carver," Isla's pen stilled. "Mr. Navarro, is everything all right? Is Luca? He's fine. He's home." Matteo stepped into the classroom, hands in his pockets, the posture of a man trying to appear less threatening. "I came to thank you." "For what?" "He wrote to me last night. First time in 4 months." Matteo pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and placed it on her desk. "I thought you should see it." Isla unfolded the note, child's handwriting, careful and clear. "Dad, my teacher, stayed. She said she would, and she did. Can I go back on Monday?" Something tightened in Isla's throat. "He's been asking not to go to school?" "Every morning is a battle. Crying, nightmares, panic attacks." Matteo's voice was quiet, strained. "His mother..." He stopped, jaw clenching. "She left 2 years ago. Walked out during breakfast and never came back. No note, no explanation. Luca found her empty closet." Isla closed her eyes briefly. "I'm sorry. She couldn't handle what I am, what our life meant." Matteo looked out the window at the darkening sky. "I don't blame her. But Luca, he thinks everyone leaves. Teachers, nannies, tutors. Even the psychologists stopped returning my calls after they learned who I was. You're not responsible for other people's fear, aren't I?" He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw past the controlled exterior to the exhaustion beneath. "Everything I've built, everything I've done, It was supposed to protect him, give him a life where he never had to be afraid. But all I've done is make him a ghost, silent, invisible, waiting for the next person to disappear. Isla stood, moving around the desk. Mr. Navarro. Matteo. She paused. The use of his first name felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross, but she said it anyway. Matteo, you can't protect your son from every hurt. What he needs isn't a fortress. He needs consistency. People who show up even when it's hard. Like you. Like anyone who's willing to stay. They stood in the dimming classroom, 3 feet apart, and Isla realized she'd never been this close to him before. She could see the faint scar tissue on his knuckles, the silver threading through his dark hair, the way his eyes held too many secrets and too much grief. Why did you become a teacher? He asked. The question surprised her. Because someone finally showed up. For me. 4th grade, Ms. Patricia Chen. She noticed I wasn't talking, and instead of punishing me or pitying me, she just sat with me. Every day at lunch, she'd read while I ate, and she never asked me to explain or perform or be different. Eventually, I started reading with her, then talking. By 5th grade, I was thriving. Isla smiled at the memory. She saved my life. I wanted to do that for someone else. You're doing it for Luca. I'm trying. Matteo studied her for a long moment, and Isla had the unsettling sense of being seen, truly seen, in a way that made her feel exposed and understood simultaneously. You should be careful, he said quietly. People around me have a habit of becoming targets. Is that a threat? It's a warning. I have enemies, Ms. Carver. People who would hurt my son to hurt me. If they think you matter to Luca, if they think you matter to... He stopped. Just be careful. Please. Before she could respond, he was gone, footsteps fading down the empty hallway. Isla stood alone in her classroom, heart beating too fast, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The second week brought progress. Luca started arriving 5 minutes early, whiteboard already in his backpack. During reading time, he held up his board with page numbers when Isla asked who wanted to read next. During math, he wrote solutions in neat columns. During lunch, he sat at a table near the window, and though he didn't join the other children, he watched them play with something that might have been longing. Wednesday afternoon, a boy named Ethan tripped during recess and scraped his knee badly. While the playground monitor ran for the first aid kit, Luca appeared beside the crying child and held out a Band-Aid from his pocket. Ethan stared at him, tears forgotten. You carry Band-Aids? Luca nodded. That's really cool. Isla watched from the doorway as Luca carefully applied the Band-Aid, his small hand steady and gentle. When he finished, Ethan grinned. Thanks, Luca. You're nice. For the first time, Isla saw Luca smile. Just a flicker, barely there, but real. Thursday morning, Principal Hastings called Isla into her office before first bell. I've been observing your classroom, Hastings said, fingers steepled on her desk. The Navarro boy is participating, writing answers, engaging with material. It's unprecedented. He's a bright child. He just needed someone to meet him where he was. Yes. Well, Hastings cleared her throat. I've also received a phone call from the district superintendent. It seems Mr. Navarro has made a substantial donation to our after-school programs. Isla's stomach tightened. I didn't ask him to do that. I know you didn't, but perception matters, Miss Carver. It looks like favoritism. It looks like he's grateful his son is finally being treated like a student instead of a liability. Hastings' mouth thinned. Don't be naive. Matteo Navarro doesn't do anything without expecting something in return. He's making you visible, making you matter, and that puts you in danger. The same warning, different voice. That evening, Isla walked to her car through the parking lot, keys already in hand, scanning shadows out of habit. The sun had set, leaving the lot in amber pools of streetlight. Her 10-year-old Honda sat in the far corner, alone and vulnerable. She was 10 feet from the door when she heard it, footsteps behind her. fast and deliberate. Isla spun, heart hammering. A man stood 5 feet away, 30s, lean, wearing a dark jacket despite the warm evening. His hands were in his pockets, and his smile was wrong, too wide, too empty. Miss Carver, not a question. He knew her name. Can I help you? She kept her voice steady, fingers tightening around her keys. I have a message for you, from people who are concerned about your association with the Navarro family. I'm a teacher. I don't have associations. You have his son. 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. The man stepped closer. That's enough. Enough for what? Enough to matter. Enough to be leverage. His smile widened. Walk away, Ms. Carver. Quit your job. Transfer schools. Disappear. Because if you don't, if she doesn't, what? The new voice was cold, quiet, and deadly. Matteo appeared from behind a parked van, moving with the liquid grace of a predator. He wore dark jeans and a black shirt, no suit tonight, and the casual clothes somehow made him more dangerous. 2 men flanked him, large, silent, radiating the kind of violence that didn't need announcement. The man who'd threatened Isla paled. Mr. Navarro, I was just threatening my son's teacher. Matteo closed the distance, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. On school property, where children walk every day. We were just talking. You were delivering a message from Dmitry Volkov. Not a guess. He thinks he can hurt me by going after a 3rd-grade teacher. He thinks she's weak, unprotected, and a easy target. The man said nothing, but his hands came out of his pockets, empty, placating. Go back to Volkov, Matteo continued, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tell him that if any harm comes to Miss Carver, if anyone so much as looks at her wrong, I will burn his empire to the ground and leave him in the ashes. Tell him she is under my protection now. Tell him I will know if he ignores this warning. Matteo gestured, almost lazy. His men moved forward. The threatening man backed away, stumbling slightly, then turned and ran. Silence filled the parking lot. Isla's hands were shaking. She forced them still. Matteo turned to her, and his eyes, God, his eyes held an apology and a fury and something else she couldn't name. Are you hurt? No, She took a breath. Who is Dmitry Volkov? Someone who wants what I have. And he'd hurt a teacher to get it? He'd hurt anyone. Matteo moved closer, not crowding, but present. I'm sorry. I knew this was a risk, but I didn't think he'd move this fast. You knew. Anger sparked through her fear. You knew I could become a target and you didn't warn me? I warned you to be careful. That's not the same as telling me I'd be threatened in a parking lot. If I'd told you everything, would you have stayed? The question was quiet, devastating. Would you have kept teaching Luca, knowing that my enemies might use you against me? Isla opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Would she have? Yes, whispered something deep in her chest. Yes, I would have. The realization terrified her. I need to get you somewhere safe, Matteo said. Tonight. My men will follow you home. Stay outside your apartment. No, Miss Carver, Isla, if I'm under your protection, you can use my name. She met his eyes. And no, I don't want men outside my apartment. I don't want to live like I'm in danger. You are in danger. Then teach me how to be safe. Give me a panic button, a contact number, whatever I need, but don't make me a prisoner. Don't make me afraid. Something shifted in Matteo's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You're very stubborn. I'm a teacher. It's a job requirement. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Rapid Italian. Too fast for Isla to follow. When he hung up, he held out a business card. That number reaches me directly. 24 hours. Any threat, any concern, you call immediately. Isla took the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, no title or company name, just a number. Okay, I'm serious, Isla. Day or night, you call. I will. They stood in the parking lot, the weight of new understanding settling between them. Isla should have been terrified, should have been running. Instead, she felt oddly calm, as if some part of her had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Your son is worth protecting, she said quietly. So am I. I'm not leaving him. Matteo's jaw tightened. You should, but I won't. He looked at her for a long moment, and Isla saw the exact second he accepted it. Accepted her. The stubborn teacher who decided that a mafia boss's son deserved someone who stayed. Come on, he said. I'll follow you home. Make sure you get there safely. Isla didn't argue. The third week changed everything. Luca started speaking. Not in full sentences, not yet, but single words, soft and careful, like a bird testing a new perch. Here, he whispered during attendance, handing Isla his homework. Thanks, when she gave him lunch. Yes, during a math quiz. The other students barely noticed. Third graders weren't known for their observational skills, but Isla noticed. And when Luca spoke for the first time during group reading, saying the word next to indicate his turn, Isla had to turn away and blink hard against unexpected tears. After school, Luca lingered at his desk while other students flooded into the hallway. He wrote on his whiteboard, then held it up. Can I tell you something? Of course, Isla said. He erased and wrote again, slower this time. I was afraid you'd leave like she did, like they all did, but you keep coming back. I told you I would. Why? Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. Because, Isla said carefully, sometimes the most important thing we can do is just show up. Not fix things, not solve problems. Just be present, and you deserve someone who shows up. Luca stared at the board for a long moment. Then he picked up the marker and wrote 2 more words. Thank you. That evening, Matteo was waiting in the parking lot when Isla walked out. Not in his Mercedes, but leaning against an unmarked sedan, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd had a very long day. He spoke today, Isla said without preamble. 5 different times. Matteo's eyes widened. 5 single words but clear, intentional. He's finding his voice again. Because of you. Because he feels safe. Isla stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance. Because he believes I'll be there tomorrow. Will you? The question hung heavy with subtext. Yes, Isla said. But I need to understand something. That man in the parking lot, was that an isolated incident, or should I expect more? Volkov won't try again directly. Not after my warning. But he has allies, connections. Matteo rubbed his face, exhaustion bleeding through. I've spent 20 years building walls around my son, keeping him separate from my world. It was supposed to keep him safe. Instead, it just made him invisible. You can't protect him from everything. I know, but I have to try. They stood in the fading daylight, teacher and criminal, both trying to save the same child from different dangers. Come with me, Matteo said suddenly. What? Tomorrow is Saturday. Come to my home, have dinner with us. Let Luca see that you exist outside this building. That you're... He hesitated. Real. Isla should have said no. Should have maintained professional boundaries. Kept the distance that safety required. Instead, she said, What time? Matteo's house was not what she expected. Not a mansion, not a fortress. A large Mediterranean-style home in the hills, surrounded by olive trees and gardens that suggested someone cared about living things. Security was present but subtle. Cameras, guards in the distance, but the overall feeling was of a home, not a compound. Luca opened the door. He was wearing jeans and a dinosaur t-shirt, barefoot, hair slightly mussed. When he saw Isla, his face lit up. Actual joy, bright and unguarded. Miss Carver! Not a whisper. A real voice pitched with excitement. You came! Of course I did. Isla knelt to his level. Thank you for inviting me. I helped Dad make pasta. Real pasta, not the box kind. And tiramisu for dessert, even though he said it wouldn't set in time, but I think it will. The rush of words, the animation, the sheer aliveness. Isla felt her throat tighten. Matteo appeared behind his son, wearing casual clothes and an expression of such pure gratitude that Isla had to look away. "Come in," he said quietly. "Please?" Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Luca talked almost nonstop. 7 years of silence pouring out in questions and observations and jokes that weren't particularly funny, but made Matteo laugh anyway. They ate at a kitchen table, not a formal dining room, and Matteo cooked with the casual competence of someone who'd learned young and never forgotten. "My grandmother taught me," he explained, stirring sauce. "She said a man who can't feed his family isn't a man." "Tell her about Nonna," Luca urged. "Tell her about the spoon." Matteo smiled, real and unguarded. "My grandmother ruled her kitchen with a wooden spoon and an iron will. Once when I was 12, I talked back to her. She chased me 3 blocks with that spoon, cursing in Sicilian the entire time." "Did she catch you?" Isla asked. She was 75, and I was a cocky preteen. "What do you think?" Luca giggled. She hit him on the head so hard he cried. "I did not cry." "You did. You told me." "I got something in my eye." "Tears?" They bantered like this through the entire meal, and Isla watched, amazed, as Matteo transformed. Not the controlled mafia boss, not the feared criminal, just a father tired and grateful, trying to give his son a normal evening. After dinner, Luca dragged Isla to his room to show her his Lego collection. Massive, elaborate builds that suggested hours of solitary focus. "I like building," he explained, showing her a detailed castle. "You can make anything, and if it breaks, you can fix it." "That's very wise. Dad says broken things can be fixed. It just takes patience and the right pieces." Isla looked at the castle, the dinosaurs, the spacecraft, and realized these weren't just toys. They were a child teaching himself that destruction wasn't permanent. When she came back downstairs, Matteo was on the terrace, staring at the city lights. Below, she joined him quietly. "He's a remarkable kid," she said. "He's finally acting like a kid. Because of you. Because you let me stay. Because you didn't pull him out of school when it got complicated." Matteo turned to face her. "You know what I am. What I do. I know some of it, and yet you're here. Luca isn't responsible for your choices. He deserves a teacher who sees him, not his last name. Most people can't separate the two." "I'm not most people." Matteo laughed, quiet, almost bitter. "No, you're really not." He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her pulse quicken. "You're dangerous, Isla Carver." "How am I dangerous?" "Because you make me hope. Hope that Luca can have a normal life. Hope that there are still people who see beyond reputations and fear. Hope that maybe—" He stopped. "You're dangerous because you make me want things I gave up on years ago." Isla's breath caught. They were standing close now, close enough that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the weariness that never quite left. "What did you give up on?" she whispered. "Connection, trust, the possibility that someone could know what I am and stay anyway." "I'm staying. For Luca." "For Luca," she agreed. "And maybe for other reasons I don't entirely understand yet." The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility and danger, and something neither of them could name. Matteo lifted his hand, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You should go," he said quietly, "before I do something foolish like ask you to stay." Isla should have agreed, should have left, should have maintained every professional boundary she'd ever learned. Instead, she stayed on that terrace for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, while Luca built Lego upstairs and the city glittered below like fallen stars. Monday morning, everything felt different. Luca walked into the classroom and said, "Good morning, Ms. Carver," with a shy smile that broke her heart and put it back together simultaneously. Other students noticed. By lunch, Ethan had claimed Luca as his Band-Aid buddy and insisted he sit at their table. By the end of the day, 3 other kids had invited him to a weekend play date. Isla watched him laugh at something Ethan said and felt a wave of fierce protectiveness that had nothing to do with professionalism and everything to do with having witnessed a small miracle. Principal Hastings appeared in her doorway after final bell. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." The district superintendent called again. Apparently, Mr. Navarro has pledged funding for a new literacy program. He specifically requested you lead the development team. "I'm not qualified to..." "You're the teacher who got his son speaking again. In his eyes, you're qualified for anything." Hastings paused. "Just be careful, Miss Carver. Men like Matteo Navarro don't do favors. They make investments, and eventually they expect returns." After she left, Isla sat at her desk, staring at nothing. Was that what this was? An investment? Or was it a father, desperate and grateful, trying to help the one person who'd helped his son? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Luca talked about you all weekend. Thank you." As she stared at the message, then typed back, "He's doing the work. I'm just showing up." The response came immediately. "That's everything." Isla put down her phone, heart beating faster than it should, and wondered when this had become more than a professional obligation. When had Luca stopped being just a student? When had Matteo stopped being just a parent? When had staying become something she couldn't imagine not doing? The 4th week brought Detective Marcus Webb. He appeared during lunch, flashing a badge at the front office and asking to speak with Ms. Carver about an ongoing investigation. Principal Hastings escorted him to Isla's classroom personally, her expression grim. Webb was mid-40s, competent-looking, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much and still believed in justice. He waited until Hastings left, then closed the door. "Ms. Carver, I'm investigating Matteo Navarro." Isla's stomach dropped. "I'm a teacher. I don't know anything about his criminal activities." "I know, but you know his son. You've been to his home. You're in contact with him regularly." Webb pulled out a slim folder. "I need you to understand what you're involved with." "I'm not involved with anything. I teach his child." "Do you know how many people have died because of Matteo Navarro? How many families have been destroyed? How many lives have been ruined?" Webb opened the folder, showing crime scene photos. Brutal, visceral. This is what he is. Not a doting father, a killer. Isla forced herself to look at the photos, then at Webb. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I've been watching the Navarro household for 6 months. I know you've been there. I know he's protecting you. And I know that eventually he'll ask for something in return. When he does, I need you to call me." He placed a card on her desk, different from Matteo's, official, government-issued. "He's using his son to manipulate you," Webb continued, "making you care, making you invested. When the time comes, he'll ask you to lie for him, hide something, provide an alibi, and because you care about that boy, you'll do it." "You're wrong." "Am I? Then why haven't you reported the threat in the parking lot? Why haven't you requested a transfer? Why are you spending weekends at the home of a known criminal?" "Because," Isla wanted to say, "Luca deserves someone who stays. Because I looked into Matteo Navarro's eyes and saw grief, not calculation. Because maybe people are more complicated than crime scene photos." But she said none of that. "If you have questions about Mr. Navarro's activities, ask him. I'm a teacher, that's all." Webb stared at her for a long moment. "You seem like a good person, Miss Carver. Don't let him destroy that. When he shows you who he really is, call me." After he left, Isla sat in her empty classroom, staring at his card. She thought about the photos, the evidence, the reality of who Matteo was and what he'd done. Then she thought about Luca's smile, the way Matteo cooked dinner with his son, the exhaustion in his eyes when he talked about trying to protect his child from a world he'd created. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Matteo's number. A detective came to see me today. Wanted me to inform on you. Thought you should know. The response came within seconds. Did he threaten you? No, just showed me who you are. A longer pause. And? Isla stared at that single word, carrying the weight of everything unspoken. She typed, I already knew. I'm still here. That evening, Matteo came to her apartment. Isla lived in a modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood that was trying to gentrify and not quite succeeding. When she opened the door, he was standing in the hallway, still in his work clothes, looking like he'd come straight from something important and probably dangerous. You shouldn't have told me about Webb, he said without greeting. It puts you at risk. Everything about this puts me at risk. Isla stepped aside. Come in. He hesitated, and she realized this was the first time she'd invited him into her space. The apartment was small, cluttered with books and student artwork, a far cry from his minimalist home. Matteo entered like he was entering sacred ground, careful, respectful, aware of boundaries. Webb isn't wrong, he said finally, about what I am, what I've done. I know. Do you? Do you know that I've killed people, Isla? That I've ordered deaths and destroyed lives and built an empire on suffering? She closed the door. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest, because you keep staying, and I need you to understand what you're staying for. I'm staying for Luca. Just Luca? The question hung between them, dangerous and inevitable. Isla took a breath. At first, yes, just Luca. But then I saw you with him. I saw a father who was desperate and grateful and terrified of losing his son. I saw someone who was trying to be better, even though he didn't know how. She moved closer. I don't approve of what you do, Matteo. I'm not naive enough to pretend it's okay. But I also can't pretend that you're just a monster. You're more complicated than that. Complicated. He laughed bitterly. That's a generous word for it. What would you prefer? Evil? Irredeemable? Maybe. Maybe that would be easier. For both of us. Easier how? Because then you could leave with a clear conscience and I could stop. He stopped himself. Stop what? Matteo looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes was so raw it hurt. Stop falling for the woman who saved my son. Stop wanting someone who sees me, all of me, and hasn't run screaming. Stop hoping for things I don't deserve. Isla's heart hammered. Matteo, I know it's wrong. I know I'm too old, too dangerous, too stained. But when you're with Luca, when you're in my home, when you text me at midnight about his progress, he ran a hand through his hair. I'm trying to be honorable. I'm trying to stay away. But you keep staying, and I don't know how to... Isla kissed him. Not a calculated decision, not a romantic gesture, just a need to stop the words, to stop the self-loathing, to show him that staying was a choice she kept making. For a second, Matteo froze. Then his hands came up, cradling her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything Webb's photos had shown. He kissed her back carefully, like she was something precious that might break. When they separated, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. This is a terrible idea, he whispered. I know. You could lose your job, your reputation. Detective Webb will use this against both of us. I know, that too. And you're still here. I'm still here. Matteo pulled back slightly, searching her face. Why? Because, Isla said quietly, you showed up in my classroom and sat in a chair too small for you and asked how to help your son. Because you warned me about danger instead of lying. Because you cook dinner and tell stories about your grandmother and you're trying so damn hard to give Luca a life that isn't defined by your mistakes. She cupped his face. You're not just what you've done, Matteo. You're also what you're trying to become. His breath hitched. What am I trying to become? Better for him, Maybe for yourself. Maybe, she hesitated. Maybe for us. There is no us. There can't be. Then why are you here? He had no answer. Or rather, he had the same answer she did. Impossible to articulate. Impossible to deny. They stood in her small living room, Mafia boss and elementary school teacher, and tried to figure out how two people from completely different worlds had ended up in the same story. I can't promise you safety, Matteo said finally. I can't promise normal or easy or any of the things you deserve. I'm not asking for promises. What are you asking for? Honesty, effort, and for you to keep being the father Luca needs. That's all? That's everything. Matteo stayed for 2 more hours. They talked about Luca's progress, about the literacy program, about everything except what had just happened between them. When he finally left, he kissed her forehead at the door, chaste, gentle, full of unspoken longing. Good night, Isla. Good night, Matteo. After he left, Isla sat on her couch and stared at nothing, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd kissed a criminal, invited danger into her life, crossed every professional boundary that existed, and she didn't regret it, not even a little. The final week brought resolution. Luca gave his first oral report, 3 minutes on Triceratops, delivered with notes on index cards and genuine enthusiasm. The class applauded. Isla blinked back tears. Principal Hastings, watching from the back, actually smiled. After school, Detective Webb called. I know about you and Navarro, he said without preamble. I know you're involved with him personally now. Isla's stomach clenched. That's not... Don't bother denying it. I have surveillance, photos, enough to make a case that you're compromised. A case for what? For removing you from that classroom. For investigating whether you're helping him with criminal activities. For destroying your career. Why are you telling me this? Webb sighed. Because despite everything, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're in over your head, so I'm offering you a deal. Walk away from Navarro, transfer schools, cut all contact, and I'll forget what I saw. And if I don't, then I'll do my job, and you'll lose everything. Isla hung up. Her hands were shaking, but her decision was clear. That evening, she met Matteo at his house. Luca was at a friend's house, his first sleepover, evidence of how far he'd come. Webb called, she said immediately. He knows about us. He's threatening my career. Matteo's expression darkened. I'll handle him. How? By threatening him? Having him disappear? If necessary. No. Isla stepped closer. You don't get to solve my problems with violence. That's not who I need you to be. Then what do you need? I need you to let me make my own choices. I need you to trust that I'm staying because I want to, not because I'm trapped. She took his hands. I'm choosing this, Matteo. Choosing Luca. Choosing you. Even knowing the cost. The cost is too high. That's not your decision. They stood in his kitchen, hands clasped, and Isla watched him wrestle with the instinct to protect versus the need to respect. If you lose your job, he started, then I'll find another, but I won't lose Luca, and I won't lose you. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice, and I'm making mine. Matteo pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Isla felt the tension in his body, fear and gratitude, and something that felt dangerously close to love. I don't deserve you, he whispered into her hair. Maybe not. But Luca does, and I'm a package deal now. He laughed, soft, broken, real. How did a third-grade teacher become the most dangerous person in my life? By staying. When everyone else left, I stayed. You did. He pulled back to look at her, and I will never stop being grateful for that. 1 month later, Principal Hastings called Isla into her office. I've received notice from the district, she said, face unreadable. Detective Webb has filed a formal complaint regarding your relationship with Matteo Navarro. He's requesting you be removed from Luca's classroom immediately. Isla's heart sank. I see. However, Hastings leaned forward, I've also received letters, 23 of them to be exact, from parents whose children are in your class, every single one praising your dedication, your skill, and the transformation they've seen in their kids, especially Luca Navarro. She slid a stack of papers across the desk. I've also received a personal visit from Mr. Navarro. Not threatening before you ask. He simply wanted me to understand that you've given his son something he thought was impossible. A voice, a future, a childhood. Hastings sat back. So here's what's going to happen. You're staying in your classroom. Detective Webb can investigate all he wants, but unless he finds evidence of actual wrongdoing, which I doubt he will, you're protected. The parents want you. Luca needs you, and frankly, you're one of the best teachers we have. Isla couldn't speak. That said, Hastings continued, be smart, be careful, and remember that perception matters. You're walking a fine line, Miss Carver. I understand. Do you? Do you understand that if this goes wrong, I can't protect you? That if Matteo Navarro's world touches this school in any violent way, you'll be the first person blamed? I understand, Isla repeated, and I'm staying anyway. Hastings studied her for a long moment, then surprisingly, she smiled. You know what? I believe you. Dismissed, Miss Carver. That afternoon, Isla stood in her classroom after final bell and called Matteo. I'm keeping my job, she said when he answered. Webb's complaint didn't work. How? Parents, community support, and apparently your very careful, non-threatening visit to the principal. I simply wanted to express gratitude in a way that made it clear you'd be very ungrateful if I was removed. Something like that. Isla laughed. Thank you. Thank you, Isla, for everything you've done, everything you are. I'm just a teacher. You're so much more than that. To Luca, to... He paused. To me. Isla closed her eyes, feeling the weight and wonder of those words. Same, she whispered. Same. 6 months later, Luca stood in front of the class, holding a poster board covered in photos and drawings. This is my project on heroes, he announced clearly, confidently. Most people think heroes have superpowers or fight bad guys, but I think heroes are people who stay when things are hard, people who show up even when they're scared, people who see you when everyone else looks away. He pointed to a photo he'd drawn, crude but recognizable. A woman with dark hair and a kind smile standing in a classroom. This is Ms. Carver. She's my hero. Because when I couldn't talk, she listened. When everyone else left, she stayed. She taught me that being quiet is okay, but having a voice is better. And she showed me that some people keep their promises. The class erupted in applause. Isla, sitting at her desk, pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting tears. After school, Matteo waited in the parking lot, not hiding, not lurking, simply there, Luca holding his hand. We wanted to thank you properly, Matteo said. For the hero project, for everything. It was his idea, Isla said, kneeling to Luca's level. And you did amazing, kiddo. Dad helped with the poster board, but I wrote all the words myself. I could tell, they were perfect. Luca hugged her, spontaneous, genuine, full of all the affection he'd finally learned to express. Then he ran off to play on the swings, leaving the two adults alone. He called you a hero, Matteo said quietly. He's the brave one. So are you. Matteo moved closer, not quite touching, but present. You saved him. You stayed when nobody else would. I made a promise. You kept it. Most people don't. They watched Luca swing higher, laughing with classmates who now considered him a friend. The transformation was complete. A silent, terrified child had become a joyful, talkative third grader. I love you, Matteo said suddenly. Ila's breath caught. I know it's complicated. I know we're from different worlds. I know loving me puts you at risk, but I've spent 40 years not saying what I feel, and I'm done with that. He turned to face her fully. You saved my son. But you also save me. You make me want to be better, to earn what you see in me. And I love you for that. I love you for staying. Isla looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, devoted man, and felt every wall she'd ever built crumble. I love you too, she said, even though it's insane, even though it's dangerous, even though every reasonable part of me says I should run. Why don't you? Because, Isla said, echoing her own words from months ago, some people are worth staying for. Matteo kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. In the distance, Luca cheered, delighted that the two most important people in his life had finally figured out what he'd known for months. They pulled apart, both smiling. So what now? Isla asked. Now? We keep going. You teach. I try to be better. And we figure out how to build a life together, even when everything says it's impossible. Sounds complicated? It will be. Good. Isla took his hand. I've always preferred complicated. They stood in the school parking lot, teacher and Mafia boss, and watched Luca play in the golden late afternoon light. The future was uncertain, dangerous, full of obstacles and risks and complications. But they were staying, both of them, together. And sometimes staying was the bravest thing you could do.